Hello and welcome to That's Not Spit, It's Condensation. I'm Ryan Beach, and on today's episode, I'm going to talk about my experience auditioning for the principal trumpet position with the Philadelphia Orchestra. This audition was at the end of October, and I personally was incredibly happy with the outcome of this audition. In this audition, I was able to make the final round, which was pretty amazing for me for a lot of reasons. The most obvious reason is because it's cool to be in the finals of such a really big audition. It's kind of something I had wanted for my entire career since I was younger, in school at Northwestern and OCU, thinking about, it would be so cool to be principal trumpet of an orchestra at that caliber, and yet I've had so much trouble finding success in auditions, and so to have this kind of outcome is really encouraging and pretty amazing. But the main thing that I'm grateful for this audition is that more than anything, it confirmed that the audition system that I've been developing for myself and for my clients works. If I would have had the success that I had in the Atlanta Symphony Principal audition, which I had talked about in a previous episode that you can go back and listen to, I was able to make finals there, but actually go past finals and get a trial as principal trumpet. If I just would have had that success, which would have been amazing, don't get me wrong, but if I didn't advance in Philadelphia, I feel like it would have felt like I just got lucky in Atlanta, right? I would have just been like, well, it was that committee, it was that audition, and I guess I'm just going to have to wait till the stars align, so to speak. But for me to have an outcome like this in the Philadelphia audition, making the finals in a high-profile orchestra, it's in the very next audition too, right? It wasn't like it had to happen later. It was also a year later, actually to the day, which is kind of crazy, but it was a year later to the day. It shows me that the system that I'm using is able to produce repeatable results, which is something that I wanted. And I already knew this. I had seen this with some of my clients. I had had clients regularly make finals for military band auditions and to advance. And my wife is also coaching using the same system. And she's seen some players be able to advance auditions and even win auditions. And so we've seen it work. But for me to see it work for myself in these auditions, there's just a lot of confidence I have in this system now. And that was exciting. I'm very happy about that because, again, that's kind of what's important to me right now at this stage in my life. And so I wanted to talk about this Philadelphia audition because I've been doing episodes like this for the past couple of auditions I've taken. And I want to say that this episode's going to be a little bit different than the previous audition episodes I've done. I've now done ones for Chicago in 2019, St. Louis in 2022, and then the Atlanta audition last year in 2024. And in those, I talked a lot about the structure of what I did. I talked about how I programmed things and how I organized things and what I did here and how I recorded myself. In this particular episode, I'm not going to go into as much detail about the particular program I used. Although I will talk about a pretty important and significant change I used organizationally. Instead, what I want to do is I want to talk about how I felt during this audition prep. I want to go a little more in depth on the personal side of things, and I want to talk about why I decided to take this audition, what success meant to me in this audition, how I was feeling during the process, and then especially how I was feeling right before and during the audition. What was my mental state like? I just feel this was one of the stronger things or stronger aspects about my audition was my mindset, and I'm excited to share about that. And then, what I was going through during the audition, there was some things I was dealing with that were less than ideal. And I want to talk about how the process I used to prepare allowed me to stay still on the inside. Not still, well, you know what I mean. Still like I was calm and cool and collected. And it was able to allow me to perform like myself throughout the process. In this audition, the semifinal and final round was stacked with some incredible players. which comes as no surprise, right? An audition like Philadelphia, Principal in Philadelphia especially, you're going to have the best of the best. You're going to have everybody coming out who's ever dreamed of having a job like that. And so it can be easy for someone like me to, I've just recently, pulled myself out of a long slump. I mentioned in the Atlanta audition, I think it was 8 auditions over 11 years that I did not advance. So advancing in Atlanta, somebody may see that and go, oh, Ryan's, doing really well. But it's very easy for me to feel like, no, I did well once and 8 other times I've struggled. So it would be easy for me to be intimidated going up against players with bigger jobs who have had more audition success than me. It would just be easy for me to feel like I didn't belong. But what I'm excited to share in this episode is the story behind why I did feel like I belonged and how I was able to remain still and calm throughout this entire process, even when things weren't going my way. This is the story of my audition for the Philadelphia Orchestra. So I want to start this story by sharing with you why I decided to take this audition. There are many reasons that people take auditions. They most obviously want to win the job. They say that job is awesome and I want employment, or I have employment, but this job is higher profile, or whatever reasons, right? To win the job is a reason someone takes an audition. Maybe they take an audition because they want to prove something to themselves, or they want to prove something to others. They want to say, like, these people have said I can't do it, or sometimes I've doubted myself and I'm going to work hard and I want to take this audition to show myself I can succeed, or I can prove to others that I can succeed. Or maybe some people are unhappy with their current life situation. Something about their job, or something about, maybe you're a freelancer and you're tired of driving around everywhere. So you say, you know what? I want to commit myself to pursuing winning a full-time job so I can be in one place for one length of time and have some stability that I don't currently have in my life. Or maybe you're somebody who's doing a ton of teaching and you love teaching, but it's not where you saw yourself end up. So you want to make efforts to try to change that by winning an audition. I can say for me, taking some auditions in the past because I was unhappy has been motivation for me in the past. So I think all of these can be strong motivations. I would say for me, none of those were my motivation in this particular audition, though. In this audition, because I had spent so much time developing audition systems over the years and practice systems, and I have now dedicated myself to being a coach to help other people have those better outcomes in auditions, I think it's important for me to be a coach that walks the walk, a coach who is currently taking auditions, one who can empathize. I wanted to keep putting myself through the process, right? So I could not only continue improving my audition process in an effort to more clearly share. I wanted to be able to say with clarity, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. But I also wanted to remember how much the audition process sucks. It does. It sucks. It's an incredibly vulnerable thing to put yourself out there like that. And for many people, when things don't work out, it can feel very defeating, like you're just not cut out for it. I had a lot of moments like that between 2014 and 2024. Auditions where I worked really hard and all of my effort felt like it meant nothing. So, like I said in the Atlanta episode, when I was able to break through in that audition and not just advance, but actually go all the way to getting a trial, it was an overwhelming feeling. I don't know if I mentioned this in the episode, but I actually cried when I found out I got into the finals of that audition. I remember I found out quite quickly, actually. I got in my car to leave, and before I was out of the parking lot, I got a text that I had made the finals, and I just was driving back to my friend's house, and I just started crying. It was sort of this feeling that was like, wow, this doesn't have to necessarily be over, I thought I had past my prime. All of those not successes, all of those negative outcomes, I was maybe beginning to let them define me. And this was a sort of a left turn for me. And so I made a podcast after that episode sharing what I thought worked. But I knew there was always a thought in the back of my mind that I was going to have to do it again. I knew in order for me to prove to myself that my success in Atlanta was a product of my audition system, and it wasn't just luck, I was going to have to take another audition and do it all over again. I just, simply put, I felt like I needed to take another audition to see if my audition process could produce repeatable success. And so that's where my head was at. It wasn't necessarily I need to win this audition or anything like that. It was, this is the next opportunity I have to dive into the audition process to see not can I be successful, but can I be successful again? If you know anything about storytelling, you know that no good story is complete without some sort of conflict. In a story about auditioning, conflict might show up as maybe having travel plans get messed up and you barely make it to the audition. Or maybe you're in an Airbnb that gets flooded the morning of your audition. My friend Sam Huss talked about that when he had won his audition as Principal Trumpet in Richmond. Or maybe you don't own a rotary trumpet and you go to an audition where a rotary trumpet is required and it becomes a source of conflict about what are you going to do in relationship to not having a rotary. For this audition, I did not have any of those kinds of conflicts. My travel went smoothly, my Airbnb was okay, and rotary thankfully wasn't required for this audition. If I'm being very honest, the conflict I was experiencing for this particular audition was that I wasn't really sure I wanted the job I was auditioning for. Now, it might be quite surprising to hear me say that, so I want to pull back the curtain a little bit to help you understand why I'm saying this. And to start, I want to make sure it's clear that my feelings about not wanting or wanting to win or not wanting to win or anything like that, they have nothing to do with the actual job itself in Philadelphia. Like I said earlier, performing in a group like that is the actual dream I had starting out. And it's a dream for a lot of people, and it would be an incredible opportunity if I were to win that audition. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's the real crux of my problem is that where I stand right now as a human being, if I'm being honest with myself and you listening, I just want something different in my life. I don't see playing full-time in an orchestra is where my life should be headed at this exact moment. Last season in the Alabama Symphony Orchestra was my 11th season playing in Alabama, and it's my 12th playing in professional orchestras. When I hit my 10th season, so 2 seasons ago, my 10th season in Alabama, that is, I sort of looked back over the last 10 years and I thought to myself, wow, my life looks pretty much the same as it did 10 years ago, at least in terms of my job. In that time, I had gotten married, I became a dad, I bought a house, I switched from Bach trumpets to Yamaha. So in many ways, my life was very different, but in terms of my job and my career, things were pretty much the same. I just couldn't help but begin thinking and wondering, how would I feel during my 20th season in Alabama, where I might look back and I think, wow, my life looks pretty much the same as it did 20 years ago. And the kind of person I am, I was not super excited about that possibility. Now, I know there's tons of people who play in orchestras, even the same orchestra, for their entire careers, and it's great. Like, this is, I would say, a lot of players, probably the vast majority of players, we set out to be in an orchestra and then we get the job and then we go, cool, this is what I said I wanted. And that is sort of the direction we go in, and we just stay doing that thing. Again, maybe we change orchestras or something like that if we are able to win another audition. But it just seems like as I've learned more about myself, I'm just not built that way. And I felt ready for something different. Now, you may be aware of this depending on how long you've been listening to my podcast, but starting this podcast, That's Not Spit, It's Condensation, was the beginning of being different, or was the beginning of exploring what could be different. I started the podcast in 2019, and about a year later, a little over a year later, I started my YouTube channel in September of 2020. And I just fell in love with making videos and sharing ideas with people, hearing from people how helpful it was. Or there's one particular person who is letting me know on a regular basis that he does not like how I talk about fast air. So maybe sometimes it's hearing from people who are not fans of what you're saying either. But at a certain point, this is like what I was really enjoying doing. I was enjoying doing it so much, actually, that I was actually considering shifting away from playing full-time in the trumpet and into video production. I was looking to do freelance video work. For a little while, I assisted a full-time videographer, photographer. Like, he makes all of his money doing that, and I was assisting him, helping him with photography shoots and video shoots, and I was getting my own work, doing, various like talking head videos and B-roll. I was doing this kind of work a few years ago. Let's say a little over a year ago. I started doing social media stuff for a ice cream shop in my neighborhood, and I did also social media for a brief time for a wedding venue owned by the same people. So in my mind, there was a lot of stuff that was like, hey, my life is going in a completely different direction, and I was just all for it. I was thinking, yeah, I'm totally on board. And through these efforts, one of the things that I really found out about myself is I really enjoy and I value giving to a community. I've gotten comments about we're sort of back over talking about trumpet and the video production for trumpet, like on my YouTube channel. But I've just gotten a lot of comments about how helpful the videos are to people. And I know I've learned a lot from YouTube. So being able to give back to the platform that taught me, I learned video freelancing and stuff like that. I learned that all from YouTube. So I felt strongly I wanted to give back to this platform that had taught me a lot. And in addition to that, from when I was making videos about my trumpet teaching or my thoughts or philosophies, forcing myself to think through those thoughts has been an incredibly valuable asset to my teaching and my coaching. And so, I'm following a thread. I'm like, well, maybe I want to be a coach, or maybe I should audition still, or maybe I want to be a freelance videographer. And as I've tried to sift for a long time, it felt like I was throwing paint at the wall. I was just trying stuff. I was like, well, let me take everything that comes my way, see what happens, see what grows, see what doesn't. And after a period of time, relatively recently, it just became clear that coaching for auditions, coaching people to improve their habits as trumpet players and as musicians, this is what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. In all honesty, when I began coaching in the summer of 2024, that's when it felt like I had found this thing that was like, this is what I want. This is good for me. I loved how I like the challenge of a puzzle to solve, where someone's going through something and we share some ideas and see how that works. And I also love how much it asks of me to continue to dig, like taking multiple auditions to learn more about my audition process so I can share with others with more clarity. I can go into detail in another episode, a different time, about the story behind how I got to this point where coaching was the way that I eventually kind of sifted through. But for this episode, I think it's only important to know that coaching felt much more important to me in 2024 and beyond than performing performing felt like at that point in my career. I actually felt so strongly about this that during the 2024-2025 season, so this was last year, my wife and I came to the decision that I would quit my job with the Alabama Symphony Orchestra. and then I would dive headfirst into coaching full time when I was done with that. Instead of quitting, I ended up, some very smart people ended up convincing me to ask for a 1-year leave of absence, and that was granted to me. And I'm currently on this 1-year leave of absence. So if you weren't aware, I'm not going to my job in the Alabama Symphony Orchestra right now. I am on leave. I'm not getting paid, and it's full-time content creation, full-time coaching, working with people. This is what I'm doing right now. I do have the option to go back to the Alabama Symphony Orchestra, and I will have to weigh the options and make my decision on that in a few months. Now, you might be like, what does this have to do with the Philadelphia Orchestra? Well, the final piece of this puzzle, or what does it have to do with this audition? The final piece of this puzzle that is important for you to know is that my time with the Alabama Symphony Orchestra has been very difficult. I have had some very challenging experiences, and if I'm being very honest with you, I'm trying to be very honest in this episode so you can kind of understand the stakes or why I was conflicted or anything like that. But if I'm being honest with you, I've wanted out of the Alabama Symphony Orchestra since 2019. So to be able in 2025 to be able to be in a place where I actually was able to leave the orchestra on a 1-year leave of absence, to lose that income, and through God's help, be able to build something that could support our family and provide meaningful work is incredible. And it's the realization of a 6-year dream that I've been working toward since I started the podcast, my YouTube channel, the videography stuff, all of that, right? So the picture I'm painting, I learned all these skills. I found I love coaching more than I enjoy performing at this point. And I dedicated myself to working incredibly hard for the past 6 years. And now I'm in a place where I'm realizing this dream of doing what I feel like I'm meant to be doing. So to imagine winning the audition in Philadelphia was to imagine doing less coaching, having less time for content creation, needing to spend more time doing the things I was looking to change from, more time playing in an orchestra, uprooting my family, uprooting my kids from their school, my wife losing her full-time performing job, and leaving this life in Alabama that I really enjoy, and that was hard for me to think about. And if you especially consider what I was saying at the beginning, that my main aim was not so much to win the audition, but to see if my process could repeat the success I had in Atlanta, I think you could hopefully understand with a little bit more clarity why I was conflicted in this process. And so from the beginning of this audition process, I felt conflicted on the inside. Now, the interesting thing is, even though I felt this, I still got to work, and I still followed my plan the way I would do it. If I wanted to win the job desperately or deeply, or I was confident, whatever, I worked as if I was going to try to win the job. I didn't necessarily feel like I needed to hype myself up to be able to effectively prepare. I just needed to execute my system day in and day out. My perspective on life was I just figured that I would take care of that part, and God would help me figure out the rest of it later. And that is pretty much exactly what happened. Okay, so this part of the episode is going to be the part where I talk a little bit about the system that I used to prepare, like the actual organization. In terms of the system, it was very similar to what I used to prepare for Atlanta. And in some ways, I actually couldn't change too many variables. This is something that's interesting, I think, about... Well, I'll talk about this in just a second because I want to finish my thought. I do this sometimes. I don't know if it happens to you. I start one thought and another starts in my head, and then I go over here and go over here. But to finish my original thought, I felt like I needed to do about the same thing in Philadelphia that I did in Atlanta, or something very similar, so that I could see if the system in Atlanta could work again. If that makes sense. Like if I changed a ton of things about it, then I'd be like, well, how would I know, what it was, right? So it was more about testing the system than it was about getting the result. It's almost as if the result of trying to advance, make finals, and win was a downstream benefit of trying to figure out the process that would be repeatable or give me repeatable success. So I think this is actually one of the most difficult and exciting parts about building your own system is that you can't really do it quickly. The system that I used for Philadelphia is a system that I've been refining over 4 auditions, over 6 years, plus adding some ideas that I was testing in my fundamental routines along the way from books that I read and experiences that I've had and workout programs that I've done in the gym. Like there's so many things that have gone into crafting and refining this. And I really believe, again, this is difficult because of how long it takes, but it's exciting because you're really crafting something long-lasting to truly build an effective system that you trust to prepare you the way you want. You can really only change 1 or 2 variables per audition, because if you change more than that, it's not going to help you learn which variables are the ones that made the difference. So I hope that makes sense. If you're like, well, I did certain mental things and I, practiced my excerpts a certain way and I recorded myself a certain amount. If you're like, well, next time I'm going to do no mental work and I'm going to just run the excerpts a whole bunch and then I am not going to record myself at all. Let's say you did not have as much success in the audition. You didn't feel as prepared. Well, it'd be hard for you to say, well, what was the reason? What was the cause? Similarly, if you added a bunch of new things to your audition preparation system that you were trying to test and you were more successful, it would be hard for you to be able to suss out exactly what were the things that you changed that made a big difference so you could continue to do them and continue refining. So in terms of mindset, I just continued exactly what I did in Atlanta. But I wrote new statements and new "it is like me" statements. So in Atlanta, I don't remember what the long statement was. I could pull it out and read it. But the "it is like me" statements were like, it is like me to be compelling, musically compelling. It is like me to play with ease, and it is like me to play with confidence, I think. I developed a questionnaire where I fill out the questionnaire, and then I use that information to create a new statement. And so my longer statement for this audition was date October 25th, 2025. I am confident, I make playing sound easy, and my musicianship is compelling. Because of this, I feel total freedom, a direct connection from my head to my trumpet bell, supremely confident in my preparation and skills, unconcerned with what others are doing. I accomplished this by embracing curiosity, patience, deliberate practice, and always having a plan. I turned weaknesses into strengths through organization, discipline, and affirming my desired goals and identity each day. I am confident, I make playing sound easy, and my musicianship is compelling. And then my "it is like me" statements that I wrote were, and I actually kind of want to like explain these a little bit because I think it could help you. If you're listening to this and you want to try this stuff out, it could help provide a little bit of a template to think about. So my first "it is like me" statement was, it is like me to let go and perform in flow state. That is essentially how I wanted to feel on stage when I'm playing the actual audition. So if you're going to write some affirmations for yourself, one of them you might think about having it be, how do I want to feel on stage? Do you want to feel confident? Do you want to feel relaxed? Do you want to feel focused? How do you want to feel on stage? And maybe write an affirmation related to that. The next "it is like me" statement is, it is like me to carry myself like the great trumpet players I admire. I just knew I was going to show up to this Philadelphia audition and there were going to be incredible players, and I admire many of these players. And I couldn't see myself as some sort of underdog, or I needed to try not to see myself as someone who was sort of below or not capable or not as good or anything like that, because I would have played like that and I would never have had a chance to be competitive. So I had to sort of try to see, I belong here. I'm trying to affirm that I have just as much of a chance to be successful as anybody else does, and I need to carry myself like that. So that was kind of almost like a, how do I want to be feeling when I'm at the audition itself? The third "it is like me" statement was, "It is like me to make music sound easy and compelling. This is what I want the committee to think when I play. I want them to think, wow, listen to all of that music that person is making, and wow, listen to how easy it sounds." And then 4, "It is like me to play with a beautiful sound, jaw-dropping power, and refined lyricism." So that is essentially things that I think are strengths of my playing that I wanted to think about throughout the process. I wanted to implement and imprint these things as big picture. No matter what's happening, these things are true about me all the time. In terms of practice strategies, I continued recording everything that I was doing in the program and listening back to make sure I was doing what I thought I was doing, and then journaling my thoughts so I could easily reference back to things that were working and affirming those types of things. The main change that I made was I built a system of organization that was different from before. So the previous system of organization was 2-week phases. There are 3 2-week phases, so 6 weeks total. 2 weeks of phase 1, 2 weeks of phase 2, 2 weeks of phase 3. Phase 1 was kind of like more or less, we're going to start on the slower side of things, maybe at half tempo, maybe not at half tempo, and we're going to build it up slowly, 4% progression from half tempo or whatever to full tempo. Phase 2 is I'm going to run the excerpts and perform and get a sense of how I'm doing, and also have some drop down slower tempos to be able to build good habits. And then phase 3 was running things in mock rounds to train just being able to do that. This time, what I did is I built a system of organization that was based on Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve. Now, this forgetting curve is it's hard to describe. Basically, the forgetting curve is this idea that when you first start studying something, you first start learning through something, you're going to have regular repetition. You're going to engage with the material a fair amount when you first start doing it. And as you become more comfortable with the material, you're going to start spacing out how often you engage with it. So you're trying to space it out, maybe where you have a little bit of time to forget or come close to forgetting things. And then the act of trying to retrieve information that you have almost forgotten, my understanding is that it helps get it deeper. And I had first learned about this from my friend Matt Van Gel, and I had made attempts to create organizational systems with it, but I never felt like I fully got it figured out. But I read a book called Learn Faster, Perform Better by Molly Gabrian. I think that's how you say her last name. And she discussed how she used Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve during COVID to test out what would it be like if I spaced out repetitions for certain pieces by a week or 2 weeks at a certain point. Like, what would happen? And I was the research was pretty compelling that she was sharing and that her own testing. And so I used her interpretation of it as a basis for being able to create my own forgetting curve that I tested for the Philadelphia audition. So I was able to build something that functioned a lot better for that. As a side note, Molly's book, I think, should be required reading for all musicians who are serious about their improvement on their instrument. It is not instrument specific. It's not just for trumpet players. I believe Molly is a professor viola player. So I'm reading a string player's book, but it's not about strings. It's about the brain and how the brain learns. I think it should be required reading. And so I was excited to test this change because on paper, it looked like it was going to be an even more efficient way to practice the excerpts than I had for Atlanta, and I'm all about efficiency. One other change that I did that wasn't organizational in nature, but that did have kind of an interesting effect on my preparation, was that I live streamed my practice sessions on YouTube for this audition prep. I had always wanted to do this, and I had experimented with practicing on live stream many, many years ago. And I don't know, I just thought it would be cool to share my ideas and what I was doing with people who are interested in checking that out. And it ended up being a really awesome experience. I probably streamed close to a third of the total practice sessions that I did. And I just got to share my ideas and I got to hear back from people what they were thinking. I could use chat as a source of feedback. I might be like, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. Give me some feedback. Or now I want to try this. And so it was kind of a cool way, a different way to get feedback than just listening to recordings. And then this is kind of embarrassing to admit for me, as, quote, seasoned as I am, but there are actually a few times where I can remember one time in particular where a chatter caught that I was playing a wrong note in one of the excerpts from Don Juan. And I was kind of flabbergasted that after all this time, how many times I've played that excerpt, I learned that I was playing a wrong note at this point. So obviously a very valuable thing to do from that perspective too. But one unexpected side effect of live streaming my practice sessions was, and I had to work through this in the days leading up to leaving for the audition, is that I just didn't anticipate the pressure I would feel to do well, whether that was to advance or to win in relationship to streaming. Like what I mean is I was streaming and I was saying, hey, I've got this system that I've figured out and I wanted to share it with you, but also I'm kind of saying like, I think this is a good system and maybe people should try it too. And I just didn't realize that I was going to then feel like, well, if I don't advance, you know, if I say this is good and I don't advance or something like that, then I feel like it kind of takes the wind out of my sails. And I just felt pressure to try to perform and to prove myself and my system. And as you can imagine, this isn't the healthiest headspace to be in. So I don't know. That was just an interesting side effect that I had to kind of make peace with, that it was like, it's going to go the way that it's going to go. But we'll talk about how I navigated all that soon. My prep in general felt very good throughout this entire process. I don't remember having very many, if any, bad days. And I think there are a number of reasons that I was able to have this level of preparation that felt that good from beginning to end. The first is that I just have a ton of experience taking auditions and playing in orchestras. So I wasn't really learning or working up many of the excerpts. There were a few that I had never worked on, so I had the opportunity to dig into a few new ones. Like Shostakovich Piano Concerto had 2 excerpts on that I knew, but I had never played before on a list. So the majority of my work was simply just kind of reminding myself of things that I already wanted to do, things that I had already learned, and then from there seeing if I could improve upon my plan from there. I also had a deeper sense of belief that my plan would work because of my experiences in Atlanta. So, you know, in Atlanta, I did this thing start to finish, and that was not even my first time that I had seen it go start to finish and be successful in terms of how prepared I felt. So at this point of doing this process so many times, I just, on day one, regardless of how it felt, I was like, I'm going to be able to be ready. This is not going to be a problem. So this just led to a high degree of trust in the process and being calm throughout my preparation. You know, bad days didn't bother me. Good days didn't feel like anything special. I was just very even throughout the process. One of the main challenges, I probably say the biggest challenge of this particular audition, was just how long the list was. I think in total there were 55 or so excerpts. So trying to manage all that and make sure you're covering everything and you're not leaving this excerpt out that you know is going to be fine, but then it shows up on the audition and you haven't practiced it as much as you wanted to. Like it's important to do that. And I felt like the organizational system that I had, I was like, I can do this. You know, I maybe in the past I would have been like, how am I going to work out a 55 excerpt list? But this was not something I was worried about doing, but it is a challenge in terms of getting it all together. And I think the program that I wrote did a really great job of ensuring my time is used efficiently. You know, I was saying like I'm not at work right now, and I kind of had this idea that I was not going to be at work, and somehow I was going to get more of my time back, but somehow I'm busier than I've ever been managing content creation, staying on top of stuff for my coaching clients, making sure I'm functioning as a dad and a father, as well as just trying to make sure I'm showing up for more long-term goals and other things that matter. So that was a lot to manage in terms of time. And what I liked about this prep is I tracked approximately how many minutes or how many hours I practiced over the totality of this forgetting curve program. And if I did my math correctly, I spent just under 30 hours over 22 to 23 days preparing this particular audition list. Now, some of the days that I prepared, I did not record when I was out of town, so those days were shorter. Other days I live streamed, so those would have been a little bit longer. But it seems like I averaged a little over an hour each day I practiced. And when I started running rounds, I was closer to averaging 90 minutes or so for the 8 days I ran rounds. And then all total, my prep was, it was like 30, 31 days total for this entire audition. Going into the audition, kind of the days before, I was feeling extremely confident that I would be able to play the way that I prepared. In the final, what I call the mental phase, where I was running mock rounds, I had had so many rounds that went basically the way I wanted them to. And some of those days I would warm up for, let's say, 20 to 25 minutes. I'd wait like 10, 15 minutes and start running around. Other days I might warm up for 20 to 25 minutes and then wait over an hour and then pick up my horn, not play more notes, and just start running rounds. And in all of these environments, it felt like my playing was incredibly even and consistent. And it seemed like it didn't matter what the circumstances were. I was going to be able to play like me. And so building up that evidence was very important for me to feel the level of confidence I did. And it's part of my coaching now. And part of what I believe practice is supposed to do is practice isn't just supposed to challenge you, and you're not just supposed to play things that are really hard for you. But practice is actually supposed to provide evidence that you can do things. It's supposed to provide evidence that you are who you think you are. If I think I'm someone with a beautiful sound, I should have some evidence of that in my practice sessions. If I'm someone who I think I have, jaw-dropping power, I should be able to demonstrate that and have some evidence of that in my practice sessions. And I just think a lot of people are practicing in ways where the evidence that they have is not the evidence that they want. And again, we can get into that on a separate podcast topic, but that's why I care so much about organization. It's how I've been able over the past couple of years to develop the amount of evidence I have that I am the player that I think I am, and that gives me confidence to put my best foot forward in stressful situations and concerts and things and be able to deliver the way that I want to deliver. So the week before the audition happened, I had booked my flight to stay from Monday to Sunday, the week of the audition. The audition days were Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So I got in the day before on Monday, was going to leave the day after on Sunday. And as I was saying to you earlier about my sort of feelings about it, I was feeling some apprehension about staying the entire time. I wasn't taking it because I wanted to win it. Like I was saying, I wanted to grow. And so I kept feeling like I would feel better if I planned to stay through the semis. And if I was able to advance, I would just go home. I felt this way before Atlanta too. I was like, you know what? I'm not sure how I feel about the job. I don't ethically want to be in a position where I played well and now I'm in the position where I've got to deal with saying yes to the job. And a lot of people would say, that's putting the cart before the horse. But I was basically thinking, you know what? Let me just try to plan to stay through the semis. And then if I make the finals, I can make a decision to change my flight. I can make a decision at that point how I actually felt. But like I said, I was just afraid of being in a position where I would actually be offered the job and be like, well, I don't actually want the job. I just wanted to see if I could win it. Like I said, this just feels unethical to me. Now, it might sound crazy to you, or you might think I'm arrogant for saying this, but based on everything I understood at the time about what it takes to win an audition and how you got to be playing, I believed it was 100% possible for me to be in the finals and to even win the audition. And I feared this outcome. I'm not saying I guaranteed I was going to win the job just because I felt like I could. Obviously, I didn't win the job, but I believed I could, and I was afraid of this outcome. Basically, and again, this is going back, this is kind of tying it all together. Basically, I had been praying for and I had been hoping for a way out of my job since 2019. And now that I had it, I didn't want to give it up. I wanted to say, cool, God got me here, and now I want to take back the reins of control. I wanted to stay in this place of coaching in Alabama that I understood, this place that I felt like I wanted. But I began to realize that if I was able to win this audition, then that must be what God wanted for me. And by deciding to leave before the finals, it's like I was trying to control the outcome, which is not how I want to be. I've learned over the course of time that trying to take control or trying to maintain control can be an unhealthy aspect of my personality. So in light of this, right before, literally like a day before the audition, I determined that I was going to get an Airbnb for the entire time, and I was going to commit myself to staying to the entire audition process and letting the outcome be what the outcome would be. And so in order for me to rationalize this and get my head around it, my focus then shifted from worrying about what was going to happen at the audition to simply focusing on trying to play the way I had prepared to play and just let the committee decide what they thought. That felt like a pretty good headspace to live in. And so on the Monday, the 27th, I traveled to Philadelphia and got ready. So as I mentioned, I got to Philadelphia the night of October 27th. My plan was I took the 26th off completely to recover. And then my plan was to get to my Airbnb and then play fundamentals for an hour or so and try to treat it, maybe not like a full normal day of heavy playing, but I wanted to make it so on Tuesday the 28th, the day of the prelims, I wanted to try to make that feel like it wasn't right after a day off or I wasn't super beat up. And so that was a good plan, but by the time I got to my place, the Airbnb, which was in an apartment building, it was about 8 o'clock. So it didn't really feel comfortable to just blast away. So I ended up doing a little bit less practicing in a cut mute. And then I tried to get some sleep. The next day was the prelim round, and my round was not until 3 p.m., so I had some time to kill in the morning. And sorry, if you're watching on video and I keep kind of grabbing my shoulder, it's like my sometimes this happens, my trapezius muscle back here just starts to fire up and it's like kind of painful. So I don't really know exactly what it is, but when I sit like this for a while, it starts to bother me. Anyway, so the morning of the prelims, I started to begin to notice some intrusive thoughts that were creeping into my head that weren't there at any other time throughout the process. The most prevalent thought was a voice that was like, well, you've been sounding really great all the way throughout your prep, but what if the prelim round is the one time that you don't sound good? Maybe you've experienced something like that. It was very weird because, like I said, I was very confident walking into it, and then all of a sudden I started to doubt whether or not I was going to be able to deliver in the confident way that I thought. And it was just a weird experience overall to try to observe these thoughts. I wasn't judging them. I wasn't taking them as true. I was just trying to observe them and ask where they were coming from. So I ended up sharing some of these thoughts on an Instagram story, saying, I have these kinds of thoughts, but what I'm doing is focusing on the evidence I have that I'm going to be able to deliver. I've been able to play the way I'm going to play a whole bunch in my preparation, so I'm trusting that that's what's going to happen. And a friend of mine, his response, the way he responded to me kind of prompted me to want to dig deeper, and so I asked ChatGPT to do some reflections. I was just like, let me do some sort of pre-audition reflections about how I'm feeling. It's kind of a weird thing to do the morning of an audition, so maybe you would want to do it the night before or something, but it was just so interesting, and if you've never done it, I think it's totally worth experimenting with. And I won't share all of the reflections that I sort of had with you here, because a ton of them helped me develop a deeper understanding of my relationship with God and my family and all that kind of stuff. But one of the main reflections related to these intrusive thoughts was the feeling that I was seeing myself as an underdog. It was like that "it is like me" statement. I wasn't believing that "it is like me" statement to carry myself like the great trumpet players I admire. So it might sound crazy to you that I saw myself as an underdog, but even though I was feeling confident that my process prepared me well, I still had these lingering thoughts from previous auditions that I didn't advance at that made me feel like I play well, but will it be enough? Well, eventually I realized I don't know if it's going to be enough. And that's okay. Like, I have no idea what the committee's going to think. And that's actually the wrong thing to be focused on anyway. And I kind of through this realized something that has become a major part of my audition coaching is to talk about. And when you take an audition, there are two things that you have to figure out in order to win an audition. The first thing you have to figure out is how to prepare in such a way that you will you have to prepare for the audition in such a way that you will play at the audition the way you prepared. I think a lot of people struggle with that. They prepare a certain way, then they show up to the audition, and then things don't go the way they wanted them to. Maybe it's because their chops felt bad, or maybe it's because they didn't practice the excerpts enough, or maybe they felt nervous when they weren't expecting to, and their mind sort of wandered or was focused on the wrong things. But to be able to dial in your preparation to a point where you're like, I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'm going to play the way I prepared. That's the first thing you got to figure out. Then from there, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to advance, which means the committee likes me. The committee likes the way I'm playing. I just need to keep playing like me. Or you're not going to advance. And then all you have to do is just keep shifting the picture of you. What does it mean to be you? To something that's more attractive to a committee. So yeah, the second thing is you just got to find a way to play in such a way that it's attractive to a committee. So 1, learn to prepare so that you can play the way you prepare, and 2, play in a way that's attractive to a committee. Like I said, most people I think struggle with the first component, but for this audition, I felt very confident that I had that part down. That's the part I felt very confident about. I realized my struggle was in the second one. I did not have as much evidence that committees found my playing attractive. If you think about someone like James Vaughn, the player who won the audition. He won principal in Minnesota, an associate in Detroit, and 1 year in Indianapolis. He's had a lot of audition success. And my understanding, I could be wrong, I haven't interviewed him about this. I hope to be able to do that someday. But even when he didn't win the audition, my understanding is that he was regularly in the finals or the super finals for auditions. So I imagine that he has a lot of confidence in his audition process because A, he has clearly demonstrated he can play the way he wants in an audition, and B, he's got a lot of evidence that committees will find his playing attractive. So I found myself with these intrusive thoughts because I knew I was prepared, but I didn't know if the committee was going to like what I was going to do enough to advance me. And I figured, well, I can't really control if they like me. And focusing on that isn't going to help me play better. So instead, I needed to ask the question, what is going to give me the best chance for the committee to like me and advance me? And the answer is incredibly simple. I just needed to play like me. So to combat these intrusive thoughts, I was mentioning it a second ago, I simply kept redirecting my thoughts to the evidence I had that in my preparation, I played with consistency and conviction. I had heard it on recordings, and people that I trust, whose ears I trust, they had also confirmed to me as well that I was playing consistently, I was playing like me, and all I could really do was play the first round like me and wait to see what the committee thought. It kind of simplifies things, but you're also essentially surrendering the outcome. You're like, you know what? I'm not going to try to control anything. I'm going to let go. I'm going to play like me, and I'm just going to see what happens. The first round, the preliminary round in the Philadelphia Orchestra audition for principal was Promenade from Pictures at an Exhibition, Ballerina's Dance from Petrushka, Outdoor Overture, Lyrical Solo at the beginning, the opening of Mahler 5, and the Lyrical Solo from Mahler 5, the opening of the Ravel Piano Concerto First Movement, and the ending of the Ravel Piano Concerto First Movement, and then the opening of the fifth movement of Mahler 7. Unfortunately for this episode, I'm not going to be sharing my rounds from this audition. I did that in the Atlanta episode, but I'm not going to do it here. I'm sorry if that's a bummer, but I will tell you about them. I was having this pretty cool experience when I was playing my rounds the week leading up to the audition that I was able to experience during the preliminary round. And the best way I can explain it is through the lens of the show Severance. Hopefully you've seen Severance. If you haven't, I don't necessarily want to take all the time in the world to describe it, but effectively, I felt like I had developed to a place where outside of playing my instrument in a round, it was my outie. And when I was playing around, it was my innie. It was almost as if my right hand didn't know what my left hand was doing, so to speak. Like when I was playing that round, I was so dialed in and so focused that when I stopped playing the round, when I was done, it was hard for me to remember a lot about the round. This is flow state. I was letting go and playing in flow state. And so essentially it was so ingrained for me to do this that I was able to play that way. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I was able to warm up for the round the way I planned, and everything was feeling great. And so I walked out on stage and I just started box breathing the normal way I would do it. And then I started playing. And I remember the first thing I thought was the stage was less reverberant than I thought it would be. For some reason, I thought it was going to be this kind of big boomy space, and there was a little bit less ring than I thought. So I had to kind of get used to that. It's a beautiful hall, maybe one of the most beautiful halls I've ever been in. I had a quick scratched note in the promenade excerpt towards the beginning, but other than that, I basically played the way I expected to play. Like I played like me. I recovered very well too in that. And then I remember just playing really well throughout the rest of the round, but in the last excerpt, Mahler 7, I misgrooved the high C, the opening E to high C slur, and I ended up on the 7th partial for a few notes, which did not sound great. It did not feel great. And I quickly found my way back to the written notes on the page, and I finished the excerpt strong. As soon as I finished, I had basically turned around to the proctor, and I was going to ask if I could do it again because I was very confident I would be able to nail it the second time. But I gave the committee a second to see if they were going to say anything, and they actually asked me to do it again. And so I was pretty happy to hear that. Now, I want to make sure it's very clear for people who have taken auditions but might not know this, or someone who hasn't taken auditions before who doesn't know this. When you are asked to do something again in an audition, it always means they like something about your playing. You may not advance if they ask you to do something again, but it does mean that some part of your presentation was attractive to the committee. This is a good thing. The second time I played Mahler 7, everything went fine, and I walked off stage feeling like I did my job. Now, what's kind of cool about this is before I found out I advanced, because they emailed us the results after everybody played, so I didn't find out for a few hours, I felt very satisfied with my playing. I remember feeling like I played well enough, I played like me, that if I didn't advance, it wasn't going to be because I wasn't prepared. Maybe it was because they didn't find my presentation attractive, but for this audition, I felt I did my job. And then finding out I advanced was a very cool feeling. That validation that not only did I play the way I prepared, but it was attractive to another committee, basically solidified in my mind that my process is able to get the outcomes that I want. And I have so much more confidence in sharing it with others now. But it was just a very validating, gratifying feeling to be like, oh, yes, like I'm still in it, you know? So after advancing, I turned my thoughts towards being ready for the semifinal round, which was on Thursday. So the prelims were on Tuesday, semis were on Thursday, so I had a day off on Wednesday in between. My chops felt good in the prelim round. I was strong. I played it all the way through and didn't really have any tiredness, but in a weird way, something felt slightly off in my chops. Now, I figured it was because I had traveled. I hadn't really played much in the past few days, and so what I planned on doing was just kind of trying to have a relatively normal practice session on Wednesday. I figured on a day-to-day basis, my chops usually feel good when I'm playing a lot. And so I thought, I'm just going to try to play normally and everything will just be okay. But that's not what happened. All right. So on Wednesday, the day before the semifinal round, I ended up pulling an old fundamentals routine I did from the summer, this past summer, maybe, of like 2024. And I started working through it. And things started out fine. But maybe like 10 minutes in, my upper register just kind of shut down. And I found the trumpet to be uncharacteristically hard to play. I remember it being like hard to center on like F's on the top of the staff, and C, high C, C sharp, D, forget about it. Those notes just weren't coming out of my trumpet. It just, things felt awful. Now this happens somewhat infrequently. It's not something I deal with on a regular basis. And what I usually do is I just keep playing in that practice session. I do my best to play with the good habits that I know are what I want to be playing with, and just trying to say to my face, you know what, you may feel terrible, but this is how I want you to feel. I don't go crazy, obviously. Like I'll make the session earlier, but I don't necessarily just quit. And when I do this, every single time I do it, the next day everything is back where it should be. So I didn't really worry about this or anything. After my fundamentals practice session, which felt pretty awful, I chose to run a short round of 6 excerpts that I thought might be on the semifinal round. It's hard to remember exact. I guess I didn't write it down. I remember doing the Haydn exposition, and then I did the muted thing from Bartók Movement 2. I know I did the Shostakovich Piano Concerto Movement 2 lyrical excerpt. I know I did Schumann 2. And I know I did the long lyrical excerpt from Alpine Symphony. There's one more in there that I cannot remember. Oh, maybe, I think it was Credo, actually. Yeah, that's right. I did the Piccolo excerpt. I chose to do this because I thought, you know what, I'll play one short round just to stay mentally sharp. But in this sort of fatigued or less than ideal situation, I chose to do this because I wanted to see how my playing would feel if my face was somehow in this condition during the audition. It's basically almost some like adversity training. And a lot of the list didn't go the way I wanted it to, but weirdly, some parts went extremely well. And I felt like this gave me an interesting mindset where I felt like even if I couldn't play everything on a list the way I wanted to, I would still be able to play a lot of things the way I wanted it to go, or to play it like me. I hope this makes sense. Like, it was very weird because in the round when I was running, I was still very focused, and it gave me some more coaching philosophy that I am bringing in now after this audition, which is, you know, the last part of the audition preparation. Yeah, it's about running rounds and trying to make sure you can do it, but so much of it is being able to train your mind to stay focused no matter what's going on. Do you feel tired? Stay focused. Are you nervous? Stay focused. Are you feeling incredible? Stay focused. Sometimes feeling incredible can lead to you sort of almost like taking the foot off the gas, being like, oh, this is no problem, I don't have to worry. You got to train yourself to stay focused no matter what's going on. And I felt like this practice session, in a weird way, gave me the confidence that's like, even if I don't feel my best, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be able to play some things and represent myself well. So after I finished that practice session, I put my horn away and I just hung out. I remember I watched a lot of YouTube during this particular, these couple of days. And there are a lot of thoughts obviously going on in my head. You know, what's going to happen if my face feels like that during the round? But honestly, I didn't feel any anxiety about it. I actually weirdly felt quite still. I just believed that I was prepared, and that I believed my face would be okay the next day, and I believed that I would play like me, because walking into the audition, I kept thinking, I remember saying this to my wife, I don't think there's anything that's going to stop me from playing like myself. I just believed this. And I think it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen the way you believe it's going to happen, but I think that belief is very powerful for being able to stay focused and do your job. So, I certainly did some praying and some quiet contemplation during that day, and I just came to the conclusion that regardless of how I felt, my job was simply to do the best I could to play the way I prepared, and I was still going to let the committee decide what they thought. I also remember thinking, that even if I can't play high notes or something like that, it's going to be okay. Like I was saying, that was a very important thing. I want to highlight that because as I move into the next day, I waited until I got into my room to warm up, which was normal. I was planning on not warming up until I got into the room, and things felt great for about 15 minutes. When I had gotten to the flexibility part of my warm-up routine, which I'd done countless times with no problems in my trumpet playing career, I began having trouble centering the notes again and getting high C sharps and Ds to come out of my horn. It just wasn't happening. Now, this is a problem because A, this is a long list. It was Leonore 3, Mahler 5 opening, Ballerina's Dance and the Waltz from Petrushka, Schumann 2, Infernal Dance from Firebird, Shostakovich Piano Concerto number 1, the second movement, Scheherazade Movement 4, C to E, that's da-da-ga-da-dun, 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 da-da-ga-da-da, and P to R, that's da-da-ga-da-da, 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 and then the round ended with the Glacier Scene from Alpine Symphony. And so, as you can see, not being able to play a high D in the warm-up room was kind of a problem. In response, I stopped doing my normal warm-up. And I tried to play some easy scales up to the high notes, just trying to see if I could just find them, if I could find these notes again and center on them, but it just wasn't working. So I put my horn down and I just thought of all of the times I played Alpine Symphony and sounded great. This is something that I remember hearing a story from Charlie Geyer, may he rest in peace, about Bud Herseth, where he was warming up for Brandenburg, and it wasn't going well to the point where Charlie was thinking, I'm going to have to maybe play this, and then Bud just stopped warming up, put his horn down, didn't say anything, and then when the concert came around, he went out there and played and sounded awesome. And Charlie afterwards was like, what were you thinking about? And Bud was saying, I was thinking about all the times I've sounded great. So that thought came to my mind. And so I thought about this. I wanted to fill my head with so many pictures of success in this excerpt to build my confidence and remind myself that I can do this. It is something that I am prepared to do. I didn't play any more notes until I walked out on stage. So probably about 30 minutes total of not playing any notes. And then those first notes that I played were the first notes on stage for Leonore 3. And I just kept thinking to myself, again, I mentioned this a second ago, I just kept thinking to myself that, well, this problem was only going to affect Alpine Symphony, and I don't need to nail Alpine Symphony to be able to advance, especially if I play everything else in a convincing and musically compelling way. These were the stories I was telling myself to build myself up as, it's not hopeless. There is hope. I can do this. And the ultimate conclusion I came to was literally a total act of surrender. I had no idea what was going to happen. I felt very weak in the moment and not in control. All I could do was let go, trust my preparation, see what the committee thought, and trust God with whatever outcome he chose. As I was standing backstage, I also realized that one of the causes of this problem might be that I hadn't eaten much in the previous few days, even though my wife had told me to do so. And I thought maybe it's possible that just like my muscles that become depleted when I use them and I haven't eaten to recover, maybe the muscles of my face might be tired. I figured if I was able to get through this round, I would go find a huge meal to eat and hope that that was going to fix everything. In this state of surrender, I went out and I played one of the best rounds I've ever played in my life. I felt totally focused, totally present in flow state. Each excerpt felt like it went exactly the way I wanted it to go. And the cherry on top was that I was able to produce a solid, stable high D in the Alpine Symphony excerpt. I literally almost started crying at the end of that round because I was so overwhelmed that I was able to play like that, given how I felt. My perspective is that I felt like God had delivered in a big way. And once again, if I wasn't able to advance, it wouldn't be because I wasn't prepared or I didn't play well, but rather they just wanted something else. When I got the email that I advanced to finals, I felt excited. I was excited that I was continuing on in this process. I was excited I would get to compete with the best of the best. I was excited that after years and years of negative outcomes, I was finally able to be in the finals of a job that I could have only have dreamed of as a student. That night, I went out and I had a big meal with my friend, Chris, who was also in the finals at an Indian restaurant. And I played a little bit more trumpet that night to try to get my face in a little bit more of a decent place. And I watched some YouTube and I went to bed. I had another day off between the semis and finals. So the semis were on Thursday, the finals were on Saturday, so I had Friday off. So again, my plan was to see if I could have a normal practice session on Friday to see if my face was feeling more back to normal. I was kind of hoping, okay, like I ate this big meal, I learned my lesson. Hopefully everything's going to be okay. My warm-up felt fantastic on Friday. I was pasting high Ds when I was practicing Alpine, just kind of testing it out, and it felt good. But about 30 minutes into the session, things started to become difficult again. Now, at this point, I was experiencing something that I had literally never experienced ever in my life before. I didn't know what to do, so I kept practicing for another 15 minutes or so just to see, like, what's going on? Can I figure it out? And nothing was improving, so I made the decision to just stop playing. I just put my horn away. And the only other theory I was working with was that I overdid it the week leading up to the audition with how much I played that week, and I was experiencing some accumulated fatigue. So I chose once again to trust my preparation and to let go. And I was able in that moment to still feel in that moment I was able to feel a sense of peace and stillness. It was weird. I just put my horn away, and then I went out and I got some food and just enjoyed watching YouTube all day and just hanging out. I didn't really feel a need to get my horns back out and try to check. I knew I was prepared. It was this very surreal sense of complete calm in the midst of, I feel like, what could have also shaken me. The day of the finals, I once again warmed up when I got to the warm-up room, but this time I did something different. Instead of doing my full warm-up, I made the choice to abbreviate it. I wanted to basically work into the upper register, and to the point where I was I hear things sound good and feeling great, and then I was going to stop warming up. I basically thought, if I've only got 15 or 20 minutes of good, really easy playing, I want to make sure that it happens out on stage. So I abbreviated my warm-up, I heard myself sound great, and I stopped. So my last memory would be one of confidence for when I played the round. The final round was even longer than the semifinal round. We had to start with the Hindemith Sonata, the first 2 pages with piano, and then Credo, Promenade, Goldenberg and Schmiel, Pines Off Stage, Ravel Piano Concerto, opening and ending of the first movement, Alpine Symphony, Glacier Scene, the soft excerpt shortly after, and then the longer lyrical excerpt a little ways after that. Then the 4th movement of Bruckner 7, and it ended with Parsifal. So I honestly think this is a pretty fair final round for a job like this. And like I said, I did my warm-up. Everything just felt normal. I was like, oh, it's back to normal. I was like, yes, I'm ready. I'm good to go. Upper register felt easy. Piccolo playing felt solid. And I felt relieved. So again, I put my horn down, thought about all the times that I sounded good, focused on how I felt ready, and that regardless of this outcome, I've gotten so much out of this experience. And I think this is so important to navigate the grind of being on the audition circuit, is if you can find things about the audition that will make you feel like the outcome is worth it, regardless of whether you advance or not, auditioning is not as much of a drag. And in this one, it was just this story for me about how my preparation and my mindset, it was able to help keep me in the game. I just kept thinking to myself, you didn't feel great before the semifinal round and you had a great round. It is totally possible and likely that you will have a great finals round as well. I actually kept thinking about this, I don't know if you call it a scene or whatever, but my wife and I recently watched The Last Dance, the Chicago Bulls last season documentary. And there was a part in there, I don't remember what game it was. It seemed like I remember it being a really big game, an important game. And in the first half, Michael was not playing as well as he usually played. And they were maybe down at halftime, and then they came back. And then Michael plays like Michael Jordan, and the team rallies, and they're able to win. And afterwards is a clip of Michael Jordan sort of hugging and talking to Phil Jackson saying, I always believed it was possible. And I think this is the kind of mentality it takes to get to the point where you're going to be competitive for any audition, let alone a top 5 orchestra. You have to believe it's possible. In the midst of the audition, you can't count yourself out. You have to believe it's possible. It's just part of the deal that if you want to achieve at the highest level, believing it's possible is the bottom layer prerequisite thing. And it does not mean it's a guarantee that it's going to happen, but without that belief, I just believe you're not going to play the way you need to play to be able to win. When I was doing my ChatGPT reflections on the final round, it looks like the only sentence I said about this round was, I played like me, but with too many mistakes. And I believe that's why I didn't advance to the super final round. I remember being very locked in, very much in flow state during this round. But I do also remember making a lot of small mistakes that I don't normally make. And just in general, like more mistakes than I was making in rounds in my sort of my last week of preparation. That's obviously frustrating. But at the same time, the playing I did outside of those little mistakes was exactly like me. You know, it was a good round, but at this level, against these kind of players, a good round just wasn't enough for me. James Vaughn also played right before me. So let's say it's possible that I played really well, but having someone like James play an even better round right before you, it's impossible not to be compared. And in this moment, I just didn't stack up. And that's just how auditions are sometimes. I remember walking off stage and I called my wife and I was just saying, you know, I would be very surprised if I advanced, but I didn't think it was impossible. Even though I made a lot of mistakes, if I was able to advance, it would have made sense to me also. You know, I understand if the mistakes did me in, but I felt like I did enough good things that, I don't know, I might be able to sneak in there and live to fight another day. So when I heard that I didn't advance, I wasn't super disappointed or angry or frustrated. I honestly felt like I could hold my head up high. The prayer I had for that round was that I could simply walk off stage feeling like I played like me. I had this fear that after all I've gone through, I'm in the final round and that I'm going to show up and my face is not going to feel good and I'm just going to completely fall on my face and blow it and just embarrass myself. And so really the thing I wanted more than anything was to feel like I could walk off stage and play like me. And I got that outcome 100%. Even if it wasn't perfectly like me, I got that outcome. And so I felt a sense of peace in the fact that what I wanted more than anything from this audition was to see if my system could produce repeatable results, and I got undeniable confirmation that it can. The difference between me and the players that continued on wasn't that I'm not good enough. It's just how I played on that day. I can play well enough to compete for and even win a job like that. I truly believe that. And what's important about that is it's not because I've always been really good. Yeah, I had some success when I was younger, when I was studying with Barbara Butler. There's a long stretch where things just did not go my way. I had 8 auditions over 11 years, like I said earlier, where I didn't advance. Now I'm able to get a trial for Principal Trumpet in the Atlanta Symphony and make finals for Principal Trumpet with the Philadelphia Orchestra. And the difference between those outcomes is the system that I've developed to refine my playing, to gain more authority in my music making, and how I've strengthened my mindset to believe I can compete and know who I am and what I bring to the table. The thing I'm most grateful for from this audition is how much I learned from this experience and how much of a better coach I'm going to be because of this experience. I'm confident I'm going to continue. I'm going to be a coach, and I'm going to continue to grow and be a coach that understands and connects with how brutal auditions can be, how exhausting this process is, how confusing it can be, how devastating they can be, how vulnerable you have to be when you take auditions. Also, a coach that's going to help people prepare in a healthy way, how to build consistency and repeatability into your playing, how to play in a way that's attractive to a committee, to work together to find that for each and every person that comes my way, how to help people be able to stay calm in the midst of chaos, and ultimately how to use your failures to reach levels of performance that previously seemed unreachable to you. As far as I'm concerned, this audition in Philadelphia was a complete success. I feel satisfied with my effort. I feel excited to keep growing. I feel motivated to help others, and I feel confident that I can help. To conclude this story, I want to share with you a few reflections I had after the audition. Number one, the audition in Atlanta may have showed me that I still have some fight left in me, but Philadelphia showed me that if I want to keep pursuing auditions, I believe it's a matter of time when I win one, not if. Number two, the audition provided a lot of growth for me as a player, but it provided me with a ton of growth as a person, emotionally and spiritually for sure. And I think this is an incredible outcome of engaging with an audition, that it's not just about, can I win the audition? It's not even just about, can I become a better player in the process? It's, who will I become as a person in the process? How will I be challenged? How will I grow? How will I become more patient? How will I become more disciplined? How will I become more creative? How will I become more curious? Like, all of these things are 100% possible when you engage with auditions the right way, when you approach auditions with the right kind of process, and you are open to that growth. You have to be open to that possibility, and it can totally happen to you. And then you see how these auditions, you look back and you're like, I would not be the person I am today without these auditions. And I think that's amazing. 3, getting close and having the reason I didn't continue on in the process because I didn't play as well as I could have, or I was playing at that time, that has some sting to it, I'm not going to lie. My decision to shorten my warm-up was a calculated decision, but should I have stuck with my normal warm-up? Would that have led to fewer mistakes overall? I don't know, and it's easy to get lost in speculation, but the important thing is to actually let yourself feel that sting. Go to an audition. Try as hard as you can. If you don't succeed, if you don't get the outcome you want and you feel disappointed, you feel some sort of sting, feel it. Don't shift it. Don't avoid feeling it by blaming the committee or blaming the environment or anything else. Feel the sting, because that sting is what's going to give you the motivation to make the changes you need to make for the next time, and to be able to actually follow through so each audition process can get better. You don't want to rob yourself of the opportunity to actually grow and get better, because if you can grow through these processes, winning an audition is, what I was just saying, a matter of time. Number 4, I played well in this audition, but I believe the thing that kept me competitive throughout was my mind. At no point did I panic when things were going wrong. The stillness I felt, I was mentioning earlier, it was almost otherworldly in some ways, and I think that was what kept me in it the whole time. Number 5, I'm going to experiment with a few changes next audition I take, whenever that will be. There were a couple of things that I kind of got to the end and I was like, yeah, a lot of that was really good, but there's a couple of things that I wish I would have done differently. Number 1, I want to experiment with doing a little bit more of a taper leading into the audition day. You know, I really prioritized being strong. so that I would not fear any length of round. But I may have ended up overdoing it and actually maybe hurting my overall strength and by being fatigued, and obviously that's not a good outcome. I remember, so the audition was on Tuesday. I was traveling on Monday. Sunday was a day off. Friday, so Thursday and Friday. On the schedule, I was supposed to run 2 rounds of 13 excerpts. When I ran the 2 rounds of 13 on Thursday, everything felt incredible. When I started playing my round on Friday, I felt some fatigue that I had not felt before, and I actually ended up just doing 1 round of 13. And I feel like right there is when something changed, and in some ways, I'm still like trying to figure out. It still feels a little bit weird to me, even after all this time. My trumpet playing, something feels a little bit different. So I've already got some ideas of how I want to structure this kind of work, the tapering work, and I will look forward to getting more data on whether or not it'll make a difference. And the second thing that I want to experience, or I want to experiment with rather, is adding a few typical rounds, like a prelim and a semifinal round, into my mental phase when I'm running rounds. I literally randomized every single round that I ran, which really does wonders for your ability to tackle difficult lists and stay very focused and present in the present moment. But when I saw the prelim round in Philly, I was like, oh my gosh, I have not seen these excerpts in this order. It felt almost a little bit foreign, a little bit weird. And so I'm definitely going to make efforts to put a couple of rounds in there. That's like Pictures, Pines Off Stage, Petrushka, Mahler 5, maybe Schumann 2, or maybe Scheherazade or Ravel Piano Concerto, just Leonore 3, just a few of these very common first round excerpts to do it on purpose that way. In summary, we've reached the end. In summary, I'm glad I took this audition. I'm glad things worked out the way they did. I'm very happy for James. What I'm looking forward to at this stage in my career is finding people who want to play the way they prepared. They want to be able to have a system preparation that's going to allow them to play the way they prepared in the audition, then to work together to find a way of playing that's going to be attractive to a committee, to be committed to following a process that will cause significant growth fundamentally and musically, people who want to train their mind to be cool under pressure so they can pass more rounds, make more finals, and win more auditions. This is incredibly rewarding work for me. It's why I took a year off of my job. It's why I can't imagine going back to the Alabama Symphony Orchestra. I sent myself through this process of the Philadelphia Orchestra audition, not for myself, but to learn about the audition process so deeply that I can to learn about this audition process so deeply that I can confidently explain it to others and help them have better outcomes. I hope this story helps you understand that perspective a little bit better. I want to thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you in the next one.